Most people think they have the makings of a detective in them. You think you have? Well, if you do, you're right. For no matter what your profession and special abilities are, you can be quite sure use could be found for them in modern crime detection. Applied science, psychology, medicine, and the law and all its ramifications are the tools of the modern detective. There are trained men of these professions spending all their working hours in departments and laboratories of the grey stone building by the River Thames that's famous the world over as Scotland Yard. Would you like to come inside? I want to show you one small section of the science laboratory, for it played an important part in the case we're going to follow. The task the expert in charge here has is to make invisible things visible. Magic? Oh, yes. But not spells and incantations. No, this is modern magic, using the precision instruments with which this room is filled. Here, a burnt letter, reduced almost to a handful of black ashes, can be restored and read as easily as when it was first written. Telltale stains, apparently washed clean, show up as though they were freshly made. And a seemingly innocent document placed under the rays of an ultraviolet lamp reveals the secret message written between the lines. Now, just remember these things I'm telling you, and see if you can anticipate how they will fit into the solution of this case, which we have called Just a Matchstick and a Duster. A matchstick and a duster. Harmless, useful things. You'd never think they could be the means of hanging a man, would you? Here's how it happened. One afternoon, about 1:30, some years ago, a taxi driver just deposited two young men at the Westminster Police Court behind the Houses of Parliament. He was a very contented taxi driver. His cab had hardly been unoccupied all morning, and his fares had been generous with their tips. He had just started the cab and was off to his well-earned dinner when, from Rochester Row, nearly opposite Westminster Police Court, came a shout.
Taxi! Lovely, my luck's in today. Come in, Governor.
Can you give me a hand with this trunk? It's a bit heavy.
Right, go. Blimey, it's heavy, all right. What you got in it? Money?
No, it's books.
Books, eh? Oh, they do weigh heavy. And you just pop in the cab, Gov. They'll be all right in front with me. Just put the old strap round them. That's the idea. Now, where to?
Charing Cross Station.
That's how it started. Now, of course, you're immediately suspicious. You're wondering what's in that trunk, aren't you? Well, you may be right. You remember my telling you that no matter what your profession, you probably had the makings of a detective in you? Well, the chief luggage attendant at Charing Cross Station proves my point. He did a little deduction and then called Scotland Yard, with the result that shortly afterwards, Chief Inspector Cornish hurried down to the left luggage office.
Thank you for coming so promptly, Inspector. I hope I haven't brought you down here on a wild goose chase.
Oh, don't worry about that. It was reported to me that you had a trunk here you weren't quite happy about.
Yes, sir. It's this big black one right over here. I've been worrying about it since soon after we received it.
Oh, why?
One of the shoeblacks in the station yard found a little rolled-up ball of yellow paper which had been dropped. Well, to tell you the truth, it looked more like it had been thrown away. Anyhow, he had a look at it, and it turned out to be
The receipt for this trunk?
That's right, sir. Here it is.
Yes.
Now, sir, the thing that struck me as suspicious was that the shoeblack found this ticket within a few minutes of the trunk being deposited.
Oh, in other words, you were pretty well forewarned that that trunk would never be reclaimed.
That's it. I waited 3 days just to be on the safe side. You think that's long enough, Inspector?
Under the circumstances, yes, I think so.
You see, I worked it out like this. It stands to reason it's unlikely this ticket was dropped by accident, because if it had been, the man wouldn't have rolled it up in a ball first. Now, would he?
There's a very sound bit of deduction. Well, it's convinced me that we'd better have this trunk open and have a look inside it.
Right, you are, sir. I'll have one of my fellows force it for you.
Oh, I don't think that'll be necessary. Thanks all the same.
Hello. You've got it open already? That's quick work.
Just a trick of the trade.
Here, I'll help you with the lid.
Ah, whatever it is, it's well wrapped up.
Phew.
Ah, very nasty.
It's a woman's head.
Removed to Scotland Yard, and there carefully relieved of its grisly contents. The body was that of a woman about 40 years of age. She'd been suffocated and then dismembered. Used as wrappings were an old duster and torn strips of her clothes. The latter were put aside to be examined for laundry marks as a possible means of identification. On the trunk itself was a label on which was written F. Austin, St. Leonard. Not much to go on, was it? How could the Yard set about tracing the owner of this trunk? Whatever his name, it certainly would not be F. Austin. The first thing to do was to find out where the trunk had been purchased. Impossible? Not quite, but it took time. 90 hours to be exact. Yes, that's just under 4 days. It came from a second-hand dealer in Brixton.
Yes, Inspector. I sold that trunk to a man about, middle 30s, I should say. Dark, medium build. And come to think of it, I suppose that description could apply to thousands of men.
Well, there's something to go on.
Pity I can't be more helpful.
No, there are one or two more questions. For instance, when did you sell that trunk? Would you have that in your book?
Yes, I can check it up for you very quickly. Here it is, 3rd of May.
Good.
Now, there's another thing I've just noticed.
Oh, what's that?
That label isn't the same one as was on the trunk when I sold it.
You sure about that?
Yes. The original label was much dirtier than this one and very creased. But that's not all. It had nearly the same thing on it, F. Austin, St. Leonard. But on this one, St. Leonard is spelled wrong. Lenards instead of Leonards.
Oh, good work. You don't miss much, do you?
No, and I can tell you another thing, too. If there was an F. Austin at St. Leonard, it wouldn't be the man you're after.
Oh? How do you work that out?
Well, if he lived in St. Leonard, he would know how to spell it, wouldn't he?
Yeah, maybe you got something there. Well, evidently our friend the murderer thought a new label would look more convincing when he left the trunk in the cloakroom.
You mean he took the trouble to copy from the old one? I wonder if there is an F. Austin in St. Leonard.
Well, we shall soon know if there is. Oh, there's not much chance he'll have anything to do with this. We must wait and see whether the laundry marks lead us anywhere.
They did, to the identity of the unfortunate victim. They were traced to a laundry in Shepherd's Bush. That's a suburb of West London, among whose customers was a family named Holt, who used these markings. Mrs. Holt was asked to visit the mortuary.
All the same, I can't see a lot of help in my coming here. As I told you, none of the family are missing.
There's a possibility that the clothes belong to someone who had been employed in your house, a former servant, possibly. We must explore every avenue, so that if you could, not a very pleasant sight,
I'm quite ready.
uncover it, Harvey.
That's enough. I know I knew her.
Come back into the other room. When you're ready, Mrs. Holt.
Her name is Mrs. Bowles. She was employed by me as a cook, only temporarily. I got her through a domestic agency. I have the address at home. If I could go now, please.
Mrs. Holt, I'm deeply sorry to have to put you through such an ordeal. You've done us a great service. With your help, we have identified our victim.
Using every available means to develop the lead supplied by Mrs. Holt, the detectives were able to piece together the history of the murdered woman. Her real name, they discovered, was not Bowles. It was Bonatti. She was living apart from her husband. She'd last been seen alive on May the 4th, 2 days before the trunk had been left at Challingford Station. Next came the task of tracing the trunk in its journey from the dealer's shop in Brixton to the station. A large black trunk is not a thing you can move unobtrusively. You can't, after all, just put it on your shoulder and saunter away whistling. Furniture removers, carriers, the local delivery departments of all the railway companies, taxicab drivers, and even the public transport systems were all notified. Rather surprisingly, it was a bus conductor who supplied the next bit of evidence.
Of course I remember him. A fellow with a big black trunk. I was in 2 minds whether to let him on. Brixton it was. But the bus wasn't full, so on he come. And I remember he goes staggering off again at the Rochester Road stop. Not it was heavy, I gave him an hand with it. Just bulky, you know. Felt fairly empty to me.
Further hue and cry and routine searches produced our old friend, the taxi driver.
Yes, he hailed me as I was going along Rochester Road. Oh, I recognise that trunk right enough. Heavy. Yes, blimey, I'll say it was. With a lick in me back. He said it was full of books, he did. Well, anyhow, I took him to Charing Cross.
The threads were linking together and convincing Cornish that the solution lay somewhere in Rochester Row. Heading a squad of detectives, he interviewed every person employed or living there. And presently, in a block of offices right opposite Westminster Police Court, he found a solicitor's park.
Yes, sir. I remember seeing a black trunk lying about the corridor. I assumed it belonged to some firm or other upstairs in the building. I was quite sure of them.
On with the search, but none of the other tenants could help the detectives. Finally, he came to a suite of empty rooms. He went to the renting agent who had let them.
They were let to a firm called Edwards & Co. State and Business Transfer Company, they call themselves. As far as I could discover, the firm consisted of one man. John Robinson, his name is. He took the offices on, let's see. Yes, March the 9th. Paid a month in advance. The next thing I heard from him was on May the 9th. I'll find the letter.
May the 9th. The day before we investigated the contents of the trunk.
Here you are. Dear sir, I am to inform you that I have gone broke, so cannot use your office any further. Now, it seems to me, as Mr. Robinson is so frank about his financial condition, you stand a very good chance of finding out more about him from his bank.
Fortunately, the renting agent was able to supply the name of Robinson's bank, and this bank in turn gave Inspector Cornish their client's private address. You see what I mean about amateur detectives? All the little details which they remembered. The cloakroom attendant, the taxi man, the bus driver, the renting agent. When linked together, forged a chain of evidence which led to John Robinson's address in the London suburb of Camberwell. You may be sure the inspector wasted no time in getting there. But it was too late. The bird had flown. The search for John Robinson had to start all over again. The search for John Robinson was once again in full swing. It is so often a very little thing which puts Scotland Yard on the right. Delivered letter of the postal authorities, and his landlady passed it over to Inspector Cornish.
We'll have a look and see what it's about. Yes. Says the postal authorities are unable to deliver a telegram addressed to Robinson, Greyhound Hotel, Hammersmith.
Well, now, that's funny.
What?
Well, I remember he told me his wife was working in Hammersmith.
Oh, I wonder if she still is.
She was. And to his surprise and delight, she was able to give details of her husband's movements. It was only then a matter of hours before Robinson was face to face with the inspector.
Those were my movements at the time, to the best of my knowledge, Inspector. Mind you, there might be one or two odd details I've forgotten. You know how it is.
That's quite understood, Mr. Robinson.
As for this Bonatti woman, whatever her name is, I repeat, I know nothing whatsoever about her. Except, of course, that I read in the newspapers.
Well, thank you. You've been extremely open with us, Mr. Robinson.
Well.
Man from along with us.
Oh, yes, I see.
Now, in the circumstances, would you have any objection to come along with me to see him?
Isn't it the usual procedure to have more than one man along so that the witnesses have to pick him up?
I can arrange for it to be done, my cat, if you prefer.
Very well. In that case, I suppose I'd better go along with you. Though I want some other men there, too. I don't want to be identified by mistake. To the second-hand dealer's little flat over his shop. They found the dealer muffled in blankets, sitting before the living room fire.
Well, I'm sorry to have to bother you like this, and I want to thank you for letting us all come along.
Not at all, Inspector. A bit of excitement will do me good.
Even though I think it would be best if we got this over as quickly as possible. Now, you know what I want you to do, don't you?
See if I can identify any of these 5 gentlemen as the one who bought that trunk from me. I feel rather funny about this.
Well, perhaps it'll make it lend all volunteers to come here of their own free will. Well, now, let's get going. Can you identify any of these men as the person who bought the trunk?
No good, Inspector. To the best of my knowledge, the man you're after isn't in this room.
That was a decided setback for Scotland Yard. But worse was to follow when they visited the cabin.
Hey, Inspector, the bloke you're after ain't one of these gentlemen. I got an eye for faces, and I'd take my oath I'd know him if I saw him again. I told you how I'd remembered picking him and everything. No, sir, he ain't one of this lot. You can take it from me.
And so that was that. Well, there are no alternatives for Inspector Cornish but to let Mr. Robinson go. It was a very disappointed but by no means defeated inspector who returned to the yard. Now, it's standard practice, as I mentioned in another of these casebook histories, for the police, when they find themselves at a dead end, to start again from the beginning of the case and review step by step every report and every clue. Going over the ground, they call it, so the murder squad gathered in the inspector's office. And the trunk, minus the remains of Mrs. Bonatti, but with all the other articles found in it, it was brought into the room.
Well, this is where we've got to start again. I'd have bet any money it was Robinson, but I had to let him go. There's one slim lead you might follow up, though. There must be 20 or 30 newspapers in the trunk. Might piece them together and see if any of them are local editions of a particular district.
What about the old duster that was among all the torn bits of clothing?
Ah, here it is. Well, the medical boys have been working on it, and the blood on it matches the rest. It's the same group as Mrs. Bonatti's. Here, wait a minute. I just thought of something. That duster. It's the only thing that hasn't been checked for laundry marks since it wasn't a piece of clothing. Have it washed and examined carefully, will you, Seymour?
Very good, sir.
Now, that leaves nothing but the trunk itself and the label. Let's examine everything thoroughly once again.
Every square inch of the trunk was examined. The torn and crumpled newspapers were pieced together. Every detail of the case was carefully reviewed. But the chances of finding a useful lead appeared to be growing less and less. Until...
Come in. Yes, Seymour?
We found something. Look, sir. Here's the duster. It's been washed clean.
Oh, that's a nice job of laundry work. I don't see anything on it. Not a mark.
No, sir. You said examine it carefully. So I took it up to the lab. Here's a photograph of it taken under the ultraviolet lamp.
Well, I'll be jiggered. Yeah, good work, Seymour. Here, come and take a look at this, you chap. Greyhound Hotel printed right across the top of the duster. But the letters were too faded for the naked eye to see them.
Or for Mr. Robinson to see them.
Yes, how right you are. Well, his wife will know something about this duster. Check up on it, Seymour.
Yes, sir.
Clark, you and I are going to have one more look at Mr. Robinson's office. And when I say look, I mean inch by inch. If he dismembered the body there, I don't see how he could have done it without leaving some trace, however minute. Come on.
No luck so far, sir. Except that hairpin I found behind the gas brown. That might be anybody's.
Yes. Now then, we've examined the floor, the desk, the chair. What else is there? Ah, the wastepaper basket. Where is it?
Yes, sir.
Cigarette ash all over the bottom. Hello. Here, give me the tweezer. Thanks. What is it, sir? Looks like a match tucked down in the corner. Yes. There we are. That's got it. Nothing. Where's that magnifying glass?
See anything there?
Yes. A tiny stain right on one end. It seems to me we've got something here. This is Exhibit A, all right. That's blood, Sergeant. Blood.
That matchstick and the dust are going to make things very difficult for Mr. Robinson.
Yes. We'll see how he goes about explaining his way out of this. We'll give him plenty of time. Yes, that's the answer. Give him plenty of time.
Now, why did the inspector say that? Is that the way you tackle this problem? Here's this fellow Robinson who proved himself to be a most plausible rascal, and yet the inspector speaks about giving him plenty of time. Time to think up more explanations calculated to keep him out of trouble. If you're a psychologist, I expect you've thought of the answer to that one. And, of course, Inspector Cornish has spent long years in being trained in criminal psychology. You'll see how cleverly he put his knowledge to work. One thing he wasted no time about was picking up Robinson. When that gentleman opened his eyes at 8 o'clock next morning, he found two detective sergeants in his bedroom. They told him to dress and took him to Scotland Yard. And then, in his office, the inspector waited. And waited. And waited.
Aren't you going to add him up, sir? He's been cooling his heels in that corridor for over an hour. When you've been in this game as long as I have, you'll learn that a suspect who knows his suspect appreciates the gravity of his position if you keep him hanging around a bit. I think we should be hearing from Mr. Robinson very soon. Yes? What's he done? Has something to say. Bring him in at once. Good morning, Mr. Robinson.
Look here, I thought you'd finished the questioning me.
Well, quite a lot has happened since I last talked to you, Robinson. A lot that you couldn't be expected to know about.
What are you getting at?
Just this. Further examination of the contents of that trunk in your office have brought to light some very significant clues. I don't mind telling you that as far as I'm concerned, the case is solved.
What are these clues? I have a right to know, haven't I?
Excuse me a moment. Hello? Yes, sir? Yes, certainly, sir. I'll come up immediately. Now, you stay in here, Robinson. I'll be back presently. I'll think over what I've just told you.
Of course, Inspector Cornish had no intention of telling Robinson what clues he found. And that telephone call coming exactly at the right moment. Well, as a matter of fact, the inspector signaled for it to come then. He wanted to leave Robinson alone, give him time to think. Just consider what that man's frame of mind must have been. He thought he was free, that he'd cleverly escaped justice. Then, out of a sound sleep, he wakes to find the detectives waiting for him. Now he's alone in Scotland Yard. The police apparently know everything. He's trapped. Just when he's convinced himself he's nothing to fear. What must have been going on in his mind? I believe we can reconstruct his train of thought as he sits waiting for the inspector's return. Almost a full hour has gone by. The inspector has given him plenty of time.
Come. What do I do when he does come? What have they found out? I didn't make any mistakes. I know I didn't. I've been over it and over it, again and again. How can I be certain? He said he'd solved the case. Very clever, so clever. I must have let something slip. If I don't say something, they'll know I'm guilty. Last time they questioned me, I had it all thought out. I had a story. It worked. They let me go. Well, I've got to have a story ready now. But how can I think of a story? He'll be back in a minute. She fell. That's it. She fell. I'll say she fell. I'll say I want to tell him all about it. Inspector,
Robinson, I'm back.
I want to tell you all about it.
Yeah, I hope you'd make a statement.
You'll know just the bare facts. That's all you can know. I want you to hear my side of it.
Go ahead.
I did know Mrs. Bonatti. Well, it doesn't matter how I met her. She came to my office. She tried to get money out of me. Blackmail, that's what it was, Inspector. Well, I'll tell you about that later. She bent down to pick up something from the fireplace. I thought she was going to attack me. I threw into a temper and struck her.
Where did you strike her?
What? Oh, on her face, on the left side of her face. Just with my hand. It wasn't a hard blow. But you see, she was bent over and it knocked her down. She hit her head on the fireplace and she fell. I thought she was stunned. Serves her right, I said to myself. So I just left the office and went home. But when I came back in the morning, she was still there. I knew she was dead then. I must have gone crazy. All I could think of was to get rid of the body.
Is that all?
You know the rest.
At his trial, Robinson's defense made a determined effort to prove that the crime was only one of manslaughter, but it was a hopeless task. The Scotland Yard pathologist proved beyond question that death had been caused not by a blow, but by strangulation. Robinson paid for his atrocious crime with his life. This case caused considerable public interest, and at the time of the trial, a friend of mine happened to ask her grocer whether he thought Robinson was guilty or not. Well, Mummy replied, I don't know whether he is or whether he isn't. But what I do know is you never find a night girl in a trunk.